Welcome in, welcome in. The NFL postseason is finally here. It's hard to believe that 18 weeks have already been come and gone. I know I've said this in almost all the videos that I've made that it feels like the season just started, but now the real season truly begins as the Super Wildcard Weekend is just around the corner. I will be previewing all of the games and going over the team's histories as we are getting set for the wild card weekend that I just mentioned. Starting with the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys, they have a very rich history when it comes to the postseason. They have met a grand total of 8 times on different scales, going all the way back to 1966, where the Green Bay Packers first played the Dallas Cowboys. In the NFL championship game, the Packers would prevail 34 to 27. This is right before they merged the AFC and the NFC together. So I believe the Packers played either the Raiders or the Chiefs in the very first Super Bowl that year. So they had the first win against the Cowboys that year. The following season, the Cowboys and Packers would meet in the NFL championship yet again, and the Green Bay would win 21 to 17. So they would start off 2-0 against the Green Bay Packers when it came to meeting in the postseason. Jump ahead to 1982. The Packers would head into Dallas to take on the Cowboys yet again. This time the Cowboys would win 36 to 14. This would be a divisional matchup, so there was no championship on the line at that point. Jump ahead after that 11 years to 1993, where the Packers would head into Dallas yet again for yet another divisional matchup. The Cowboys would prevail 27 to 17 en route to the Super Bowl as always. And 94, yet again in the divisional matchup, the Packers would head into Dallas and would lose 35 to 9. So at that point, the Dallas Cowboys had won 3 straight games against the Green Bay Packers. In 1995, they would meet in the championship game for the third time in their history. This time, the Dallas Cowboys would prevail 35 to 9. So at that point, the Cowboys had won 4 straight matchups against the Packers when it came to the postseason action. But don't worry, Green Bay fans, you would be able to get a little bit of revenge. In 2014, in the divisional matchup, you would win 26 to 21. It's going to be a very controversial win. That's when Des Bryant would make the catch, but then they would call it back. So that was a very controversial end to that game. And then 2017, when it looked like the game might be heading into overtime, Aaron Rodgers ended up making an unbelievable throw to, I believe, Jared Cook on the sideline. At first, it looked like it was an incomplete pass, but then they reviewed it, and then he did catch it in bounds, but he was also rolling outside of bounds, which stopped the clock, and then Mason Crosby would go ahead and get the game-winning field goal. 34 to 31 would be the final score from that particular game. So for Cowboys fans, you don't have to worry because Aaron Rodgers is not the opposing quarterback. Jordan Love is the starting quarterback, and he's played pretty damn well, if I want to say, in his very first full season as a Green Bay Packers quarterback. And Dak Prescott, I apologize, is looking very well as well for the Cowboys. So with their history, the 8 games that they both have played, it is now 4-4. So obviously the winner will have the greater number, if I can say that, against each other. I am going to give the edge to the Cowboys in this matchup. I believe they should be able to advance to their divisional matchup. All right, now we're off to Detroit, where the Lions are playing host to the Rams. Hold on a second. So I'll get the team's logos on the screen right away. And this is obviously a very interesting matchup for both of these teams. I'll start off by saying that this is the very first home game at Ford Field for the Detroit Lions, and their first home game since 1993. It's been 30 years since they've been able to host a football game when it came to the postseason. The big thing with both of these teams is just 3 seasons ago, both teams traded their quarterbacks for each other. So Jared Goff used to play for the Los Angeles Rams, is now the starting quarterback for the Detroit Lions. And obviously Matthew Stafford was drafted by the Detroit Lions and then got traded to Los Angeles. I have to say, thus far, that Matthew Stafford won that trade and the Los Angeles Rams because they did win the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago. But I think Jared Goff has a bit of a chip on his shoulder because he did lead the Rams to the Super Bowl back in 2019, but evidently they fell short and lost 13-3 to the New England Patriots. So I believe he's going to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder for the team basically throwing him to the side and saying, you're not good enough for us to win. We want somebody else. And now he is on a team that loves him. And I'm sure he would love nothing more than to be able to get their first playoff win in over 30 years. With that being said, I am going to give the edge to Matthew Stafford and the Rams. I just truly think that they are a very good team, and they can be a dangerous team, even though they are a wild card and they are the away team in this matchup. But I will give the edge to the Rams in this matchup. The only two times these teams have ever met in the postseason was all the way back in 1952, and the Lions prevailed in that matchup 31-21. So Detroit is technically 1-0 against the Rams in the postseason, but it's been over 70 years since they last met in the playoffs. All right, next matchup, I'm going to take a look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles. So these two teams have a bit of a rich history, but it's not as bad or not as long, I guess, as the Cowboys and the Packers. So the first time these two teams met in the postseason was back in 1979. They met in a divisional matchup, and the Buccaneers won that one 24-17. Jump ahead to the year 2000. They met in a wild card, and the Eagles won that matchup 21-3, 2002. Yet again in the wild card. The Eagles would prevail 31-9. In 2003, they would meet in the championship game, and the Buccaneers would finally win in Philadelphia 27-10 en route to their first of two Super Bowls. And then the next time they would meet would be in 2022, yet again in a wild card matchup, and Tampa Bay would prevail 31-15. So in the playoff season series, the Buccaneers have a 3-2 edge. Coming into this particular matchup, I know I've been picking the Eagles for like 5 straight weeks, but they've been losing every single game that I picked. So with that being said, I'm going to give the edge to the Buccaneers in this matchup. On paper, you look at both these teams, the Eagles should be able to prevail, but if Jalen Hurts isn't 100% and A.J. Brown isn't that great, I mean, you can just clearly show in all the games that the Eagles have lost, they have not been themselves. I mean, they were down, I think, 21-0 to the Giants in the last week of the season. And that was a game that they had to win if they were to be NFC East champs. But evidently they fell short, so therefore they are in a wild card position right now. So with that being said, I will give the edge to the Buccaneers. I think they should be able to defeat the Eagles on this wild card weekend. All right, that takes care of all the NFC previews. I will now make my way over to the AFC. First matchup I will be looking at is between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills. So for the Steelers, this is the first time in the postseason since I think 2021/22, and they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, which ended up being Ben Roethlisberger's last game as a starting quarterback. Now their starting quarterback is Mason Rudolph, and he's been looking pretty sharp. He in his 3 starts at the end of the season, he is 3-0. So obviously he's their quarterback heading into this particular matchup. As for the Buffalo Bills, after they got off to a shaky start, I believe they were sitting at 6-6 and outside of a playoff spot at that point. They've been absolutely red hot heading down the stretch of the season, and they have now claimed their 4th straight AFC East championship. And I'm sure they would love to be able to not only win this game, but hopefully go far into the postseason. These two teams have met each other 3 times in the playoffs. The first time was back in 1974, where the Pittsburgh Steelers would defeat the Bills 32-14 in a divisional matchup. And by the way, all 3 games were all in divisional matchups. No championship games, no wild card games. So this will be the very first wild card matchup between these two teams. In 1993, the Steelers would play the Bills. They would win 24-3. And then 1996, yet again, they would host the Bills, and they would almost double up the Buffalo Bills 40-21. This is going to be the very first home game that the Buffalo Bills will be playing against the Steelers. All the other games were played in Pittsburgh, so maybe a change of scenery can possibly help the Bills get their first playoff victory over the Steelers, as they are 3-0 against these Bills. I am going to give the edge to Buffalo in this matchup. I just believe that they really, like, their window to win is like now, not 3, 4 years away from now. It's now. Like, this is their year. Obviously, they got burned last year, losing to the Bengals, and the year prior, I think they lost in the championship game, if I'm not mistaken, to the Chiefs. So, I mean, their window, it's slowly closing, but if they can defeat the Steelers, they very well have a chance to advance as far as they can in the postseason. All right. Now we're off to Kansas City, where we have the Chiefs playing host to the Miami Dolphins. So I will get the team's logos up on the screen, and I'll preview this matchup. Okay. So these two teams have met 3 times previously in the playoffs. The first one was back in 1971, where the Dolphins would defeat the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24 in Kansas City. The next 2 matchups would take place in the wild card, 1991 and 1994, respectively, and the Dolphins would win those matchups 17-16 and 27-17. So the Miami Dolphins have a 3-0 edge against the Kansas City Chiefs. But then again, we're talking about the past, and we're now in the present. And as long as you have Patrick Mahomes on your team and Travis Kelce, I can't really bet against the Chiefs, and it kills me to say that being a Broncos fan, but I truly believe the Chiefs will finally be able to defeat the Miami Dolphins. The only thing the Dolphins have going for them is that obviously they have Tyreek Hill, being a former receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure he would love nothing more than to be able to go into Kansas City and burn them and get a victory for the Dolphins. They did meet previously earlier in the season, but it was under different circumstances as the game was being hosted in Germany. So the Kansas City Chiefs were the host team against the Dolphins at that particular day, but it wasn't at Arrowhead. Now we're finally in Kansas City, so it's almost like a second take, more or less. So like I said, with that being said, I am going to give the edge to the Chiefs in this matchup. I would find it very hard to believe that they would lose a wild card game, especially at home against the Dolphins. All right. And the last matchup from the Super Wild Card weekend takes place in Houston. We have the Texans, and they are playing host to the Cleveland Browns. So these two teams have never met in the postseason. This will be the very first time Cleveland and Houston will be facing off in the playoffs. For the Texans, this is an amazing year. I didn't think they would be in this position at all, let alone AFC South champions, especially when the Jaguars, I think they had like an 8-3 record by week 12, and they absolutely imploded. CJ Stroud, in my opinion, is no doubt, if he isn't the rookie of the year, he has to be at least the offensive rookie of the year. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. This kid is an absolute stud. And speaking of studs, Joe Flacco being 38-39, leading the Cleveland Browns to the postseason is a story for like Hollywood. And it's just so strange seeing him in a Browns uniform, considering he's obviously known as being a Raven, being drafted way back when, and obviously winning the Super Bowl back in 2013. So I'm sure he'd love to be able to hopefully pursue yet another Super Bowl. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen, but I truly think that the Cleveland Browns should be able to head into Houston and at least get a wild card victory on the first Sunday of the NFL postseason. All right, that takes care of my previews for the NFL wildcard round. By Monday, I will do a review of all my picks and see how the teams did. And then by next week, obviously, I'll be doing my previews for the divisional matchups. And then after that, for the championship. And then obviously the Super Bowl in about a month's time. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, please feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. And until next time, take care.